Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I hope everyone is doing great out there. So today we are going to be doing part 3 of our Reloading 38 special with our Hornady 158 grain XTP bullets. And so the previous videos, we set it up in the first video with an introduction. Last video we did our resizing. This video we're moving on into the expanding. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. So with this, with our expanding, not too difficult to set up. And one nice thing that I like when you're using Lee dies, pistol dies, is that not only are the dies kind of just straightforward to set up, but also too they come with great instructions as well. And when you're a new guy starting out, it's easy to kind of figure out. I've seen some other die manufacturers where their instructions are a little more vague. So like whenever I was starting out 10 years ago, that was one thing I appreciated with this, with Lee, is that they just kind of made it, I could kind of figure out what was going on my own. Because when you are starting out, just kind of the little nuances of figuring out how to set your dies up and all that stuff, it's just you do go through a little bit of a learning curve on it. And so with this, not too difficult to get it set up. Their instructions are pretty straightforward, and essentially you just go ahead and you screw in the die until it touches the shell holder, and you back it out one turn. And then the thing is, you just got to remember with 38 special, these dies also work with 357 Magnum. But the thing is, 357 Magnum, that's an elongated 38 special case, so you just have to back out the die another turn and a quarter. And then as Lee points out in their instructions, you might have to take the expanding die here and, basically tighten it down a little bit more, or you might have to back it out some depending on how much case flare that you want. Now, with this, the one thing is for me, in terms of case flare, is that I always want it to be such that I can easily kind of seat the bullet in it and not have any issues to where it's going to immediately fall out. Okay, that's the way I like to do it. Online, out there with all of us reloaders, there's, a difference of opinions, between folks in terms of how they do things or their little nuances or whatever. People always caution against overbelling your case mounts, because if you do that, essentially the thinking is that you're going to wear out your case mounts a little bit quicker. And for me, the way I look at it is that when it comes to stuff like this, I don't have kind of any emotional investment in it. It's just brass. And when it wears out, it wears out. It's kind of like rifle cases. In some situations with rifle cases and neck sizing and stuff, you can use the same cases, 20 times, 15 times, whatever it might be. There's other cases where I've seen fired in a machine gun, where I've tried to rehab those cases, and basically after doing the paperclip test on the inside of them, they're already headed for case separation. I have to throw them out, and that's after just one go. So there's a wide variance out there, and to me it's like when the brass is basically it has splits or issues or dents or whatever it might be, hey, it moves on to its next life recycling. I don't really get too much in a twist about it. It just is what it is. So if it is a thing where the case mounts wear out a little bit quicker, I just bell the case enough that essentially it's going to be such that it's going to hold that bullet no problem at all. And whenever I go to seat, I'm not going to have any issues with it crushing the case or getting seated in a funky way or shaving off any of the jacket or the brass or anything like that. Okay, so that's just the way I like to do it. Your mileage may vary. All right. So we've got everything set up good. Everything should run smoothly here. Oop. Looks like we got a little rim issue there. All right, so pretty easy, you know, no problems there, except for that one rim getting hung up. But other than that, you know, blew through those pretty fast. So that's one of the nice things with the Lee app, is that basically we can get through that nice and quick without too many issues. So anyways, next up, what we're going to be moving towards is we're going to be getting our priming done, and we're going to get our cases primed and get those babies ready to go. We're going to be using a new priming tool, so that should be interesting. And then the following video after that, we're going to be getting into getting our bullet seated, powder dropped, all that stuff, and moving on from there. All right, so next up, we roll to the priming station. So folks, now we're moving on to actually priming our brass. And so I'm doing a separate review on this RCBS tool, and that's what we're using here to prime our brass. So far pretty happy with this tool. Stay tuned down the road for a complete review on it. But anyways, one of the things that's come up also is there's a bit of question about, should you trim your straight-walled pistol brass? Because one of the issues that we could potentially kind of run into is whenever we go to do our roll crimp down the road, if there's some big discrepancies there in case length, you could have some variation in terms of crimping. So I went out there and I did a lot of research online, and pretty much most people out there that have been shooting 38 for a long time, they don't bother to trim. You will see in magazines like Hand Loader Magazine and stuff where a lot of these guys, when they do these articles, I can kind of understand they want to eliminate any variables or anything that's going to affect the data. So usually when I'm reading those articles, it seems like they do trim their brass for things like this. But the average person out there that shot, you know, 38 special for a long time, it seems the consensus is most people do not. So for me, I'm not going to do that. Now, like I said, I can kind of see why people would. So that's something to kind of take into consideration if you do, want to have that exact consistency there. It's something to consider. With the 357 that I've loaded so far, it hasn't really been a huge issue. So I'm content essentially for right now just to kind of keep that same status quo for the 38. But anyways, the primers that we're using for this, it's the cellular and below primers. If you remember back, let's see, 2013, 2014, that was whenever we had the last ammo crisis and component crisis out there, where things were thin on the ground, prices went sky high and all that. And it's kind of funny because a lot of times these different scares that we have or shortages that we have, I remember in 2013, 2014, the big issue was magazines, and you had a harder time finding standard capacity magazines, that were 30 round magazines, stuff like that, or prices were very high. And this time, there's tons of magazines everywhere, no problem at all. But of course, a lot of components and different things like primers are scarce. But anyways, these primers, Cabela's, they brought them in, by the shipload, and they just had tons of them. And when they started selling them, they were $19.99 a piece. And then I also picked them up on sale as low as $16 with the 20% coupon. So good value, and we'll be using these for years to come. But good primers. The only thing is that they are just a touch wider than American primers. European primers, they tend to be just slightly wider. So sometimes with them, you'll find it's a little bit of a tighter fit. So far with the 38 brass and using this tool, this RCBS tool, plenty of leverage to seat the primers and haven't really had any issue, just nice smooth motion. And in it goes. So far that's worked pretty well. So with this project, we've gotten basically, once we complete this, all of our brass prep essentially done. And the next thing is that we're going to need to move to the bench and essentially go ahead and get set up for bullet seating in our powder drop, and figuring out what powder charge that we're going to go with as a starting load. We're going to be using Unique for this. So Unique, pretty good, pretty decent powder. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And then also too, doing a roll crimp on our rounds as well. So that's the plan coming up. So it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to shooting them. The weather is back again. We had some nice spring days, but the weather is back to being cold again. So we'll see how that affects things. But hopefully the weather will clear up and we'll be able to get out and do some different shooting and stuff. And we'll keep pushing this project forward. All right, we'll see you all in the next part.